All right, everyone, welcome to today's session. I'm really excited about this one because we are going to break down something that, looks simple on paper, but is actually one of the most important skills you'll use as a product manager, and that is writing user stories and structuring your epics properly. Now, the way you frame your user story can either drive your team forward or leave them confused and, in a blocked state, right? All right, before we get into it, here's what we'll be covering today. First, I'll show you what user stories really are and how they work in real projects. Then we'll look at what makes a good one, the structure, the clarity, the purpose of it, and all of that. And after that, we'll move into epics, right? What epics are, how to use epics, how to structure your epics properly, and also explain how to think about your stories from both the bottom-down view, the big picture, and then the bottom-up view, which is the actual task, right? And then we'll all wrap it up by talking about why we even bother with epics in Agile. Now, why do we use them at all? What value do they bring to the team, right? And yeah, that's everything we're going to be talking about today. And there's an interesting part because at the end, I'm going to actually show us how to generate your epic and how to generate your user stories. So if I were you, I'll stick to the end. So user stories and epics, right? Now, user stories and epic is something that looks very simple on the surface. Like I said, it looks very beautiful on your screen or on your paper, right? It looks like a basic sentence that says, as a user, I want to do so, 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 and so. But writing a good user story is an actual skill, right? Not something you write because somebody actually asked you to write it. Maybe your Scrum lead, right? It's how we as product managers keep the team focused on what actually matters to our users. Now, let's start with the basics, right? What is a user story? Now, a user story is simply a way to describe a product feature or task from the point of view of the person who's actually going to use it, right? So you're not looking at it from the developer's point of view, not the stakeholder's point of view, but from the user's point of view. That's why we call it user centered, right? And this really helps us stay focused. It helps us to stop designing or developing for only internal goals and internal opinions, right? And it helps us shift our focus into building things that solve real problems for real and actual people, right? If you just take that simple sentence and start dumping a bunch of them into your product management tool or a whiteboard, that doesn't mean you're done. It doesn't end there. A user story is more than just a sentence, right? There's a lot more. There are 5 key parts you want to think of. Excuse me. 5 key parts you want to think of when you're writing your user stories or when you're managing user stories. Now, first, of course, is the user role, right? What are their goals? What do they care about? If you're not sure, this is where your user research comes into play, right? The interview you conducted, this is where it comes into play. Now, the second action is what we already talked about, right? Action. This should be something the user can actually do within your product. So try to avoid vague languages that doesn't really mean anything, right? When you're writing your user real, you want to be direct, okay? Now, the third out is outcome. can call it outcome and benefits, right? Can you guys still hear me, please? I'm getting a lot of network notifications. Please give me a
Yes,
thumbs up if you can still hear. All right, thank you. Right, I said the third is outcome. Right now, why is this important to the user? What do they get from it? This helps you understand. If you can answer the question, why is this important to the user? What do they get from this product? This practically helps you understand the value behind each of the feature that you're breaking down, right? And then you have acceptance criteria, and this is a bit big, right? These are the conditions that need to be met for the story to be considered complete, right? If you do not meet these criteria, you cannot say that you have completed a particular feature, right? The acceptance criteria is where you clarify the expectations, right? What should happen when the user clicks a particular button? What error message should appear if they don't fill out a form correctly? Now, these criteria helps you stay honest and reduces assumptions so that when you're building, you get to build what they actually want, what takes away their pain points. And then we've got priority. Now, not all stories are created equal, right? You need to know which ones to work on first. You don't just pick the story randomly. You pick them serially, right? Now, based on the value, that's how you prioritize, right? Based on the value to the user and based on alignment, right, with the product goal. That is how you pick your story. You break it down into smaller stories and then you try to prioritize. Okay, so that is how you pick your stories, and these are the key components of user story structure. Now let's talk about epics, right? Epics are often used in agile product or project management to break down a project into smaller, manageable chunks, right? They provide a way to organize and prioritize work, allowing the team to focus on delivering value incrementally, right? The team can get to increase their value, but they get to do this at a pace that is very visible incrementally. They don't just sit down and wait to build everything all at once, right? They can take it one step after another in chunks. By defining epics, right, teams can better understand and plan their work accordingly. And this approach also enables, stakeholders to have a clear view of the product's progress, and also it allows them to make informed decision based on the completion of each of the epic. Now, you can also say an epic is a big and high level piece of work. I know that you've heard me use the term epic a lot, right? So I'm just going to break it down now. Epic is an high level piece of work. It's the kind of thing that you can't complete in one sitting or in one sprint. So if you've ever looked at a task and thought to yourself that there's no way I can finish this thing in one go, right? Or there's no way I can finish this thing today, right? Just know that you're looking at an epic. I call it the big sister of user story. Now let me explain. Think of an epic like a broad goal or a major chunk of work that needs to be done, but it's way too big to finish it in one go, or it's way too big for one person to finish. Right now, for example, let's say your manager walks up to you and says, we need to build a login and authentication system. I hope we're all following me, please. Right? At face value, that sounds very simple, right? But the moment you start listing out what that includes, you'll see that you're staring at an epic, right? Because under that login and authentication system, there is login, there is sign up, there is reset password, you have email verification in that as well. And in some cases, you might have the multi-factor authentication, that's two-factor authentication, right? The list goes on and on. Now that login and authentication system, well, is what you call an epic. Now, all these other things I just mentioned is what you call the user stories that are under these epic. I hope that makes sense to us. Don't worry, we'll get to understand as we go. Now, when creating an epic, it's very essential to ensure that it aligns with the product's vision and roadmap, right? Epics should be well defined with clear objective, and they should have a good acceptance criteria. And they should also be flexible enough to accommodate changes and iteration as the project or product progresses. Remember, we are focused on the agile development here. Now, by breaking down a product into epics, the teams can maintain a balance between delivering value to the customer and then also adapting to evolving requirements and some market conditions that are changing by the day. Now, from the top down, you're trying to figure out if your epic is aligned with the product's roadmap, if it's helping you move the needles that you need to move, right? Now, for example, if you're building a mobile app and one of your product's goal is user retention, then maybe an epic could be something like, let's say, a personalized user dashboard, because it's directly supporting the retention strategy that you're coming up with, right? That's the kind of thinking you need. And then always ask yourself, what strategic purpose does this epic serve? That is the top-down view. Now, this top-down view is also important when you're talking to stakeholders, people like the CEOs, the investors, marketing investors, or even the customer success team, right? These people are not looking at your code. They're not necessarily looking at your design, right? They don't care if you spent 5 days on the login screen or 10 days on fixing a UI, right? They want to know what impact this work you're doing has, right? What's the benefit? Those are the things that they actually care about, right? And the top-down view helps you tell, that story in a way that makes sense to them. This top-down view, they're not seeing all of the other user can log in, user can do this one. They are seeing it at a very high level, right? Which is the epic, because that's all they need. Now, on the flip, we also have the bottom-up view. And this is where the real work actually begins. In contrast, the bottom-up view focuses on the nitty-gritty details, right, of an epic. It involves breaking down the epic into smaller, actionable user stories or tasks, right? This granular approach helps the development team understand what needs to be done and allows for better planning and estimation, right? When adopting the bottom-up view, the team often starts by identifying the smallest components of the epic and then gradually work their way up to the larger picture, right? This approach ensures that no detail is overlooked and that every aspect, right, of the project is carefully considered. So you're not overlooking any detail, but you're also making sure that every other aspect of the product is, prioritized. Now, by breaking down this epic into manageable tasks, your team can, prioritize their work effectively, right, and deliver incremental value to stakeholders. Now, what this simply means is that once you've fleshed out your epics, you begin to dig into the details, right? You take that big idea and you're able to slice it into pieces, right? This becomes your user stories or your tasks. Now, this is where you start planning your sprint, where you start assigning user stories to team members, estimating efforts, checking dependencies, right? It's where you move things from idea to action and to the use of PM tools in most cases. Now, For example, if your epic is user authentication system, some of your user stories might sound something like, as a user, I want to create an account using my email and password. That's a user story. Or as a user, I want to receive a confirmation email after signing up. Now that is a user story under the epic that says user authentication system. Please give me a thumbs up if you're following. So I know I'm not talking. No, are we together? Please just say one talking. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you, Connie. So I'm going to continue. So as a user, I want to receive a confirmation email after signing up. I want to reset my password. Now, these are epics that have been broken down into user stories. Now, what this simply means is that now you're getting into specifics, right? Now the team knows exactly what they are working on, and that helps everyone plan better. It helps everybody deliver better and test better, right? It also helps with velocity tracking and estimation, because at this point you can measure the smaller chunk of work much more accurately, right, than the giant epic. Because if you say user authentication, there are a lot of things under authentication. So before you get to check off authentication, you're going to have a bunch of review meetings, a bunch of follow-ups to do. But if you break them down into this smaller chunk, you get to see when each person is done with a particular more accurately than it would be for you to track the giant, epic. Now, another thing about the bottom-up approach is that ultimately it creates ownership. When you break, those big epics into stories and your team starts, taking them on, it gives them this certain level of responsibility, right? It tells them that they are not just being told what part of the process. They are part of the story, right? That kind of ownership leads to better collaboration. The designer then starts talking to the developer because he or she would want to make sure that the developer is building exactly what they designed, right? So they will get into communication better. The designer would then start talking to, even the tester. The tester will understand the flow that the designer is working on. Now, people also get to ask questions early, and that's how great products, actually come into light, right? When you're writing an epic, don't just throw words on a page and expect your team to figure it out. And that's not the point of writing it, right? An epic is a tool for alignment. Permit me to use that. Right, as I mentioned, it helps your team understand what's important, why it's important, and what success actually looks like. It helps your stakeholder understand where their money and time is going. It also helps you stay focused when there are a bunch of distractions, flying around. And for all that to happen, the way you present your epic really matters. So let's start with title. Now, this is your first touch point, right? Your epic title should be short and succinct, right? But very clear. Now, we are talking about the format of an epic. What's the format of an epic? And we're at the first one that says title. Your epic title should be short and very, very succinct, but at the same time, it has to be clear, right? Remember that you're not writing a poem. It doesn't have to be a two-pager, right? You're writing something that people can look at it, read, and instantly understand what the epic is about without being confused. So in as much as the epic has other stories in it when you break them down, but the epic itself should be understandable enough, right, for people to easily grasp and easily understand, right? So for example, instead of just writing something vague like user experience, you could say build out complete user authentication system, right? You want to give it a name that your team can relate with, remember, and also refer to easily in conversation. Now, for a layman that is not relate to user authentication system, right? But for your team, they already know. Now, for those CEOs and those stakeholders, they are fine if you just show them user experience only. They'll be good with it. But for your team, you need to actually break that down, right? For them to easily understand. Now, you're not just trying to give a label here, right? You're trying to give it an identity, right? You're trying to give the epic an identity, one that your team can easily relate with, right? Not one that is going to confuse them. Now, after your title, you move into narrative. This is where you take your time and explain what the epic is really about. Now, this is where you put down the story behind your work. You talk about the context, what triggered this epic, what this epic, is this something users have been complaining about, or is it a part of the bigger company strategy, and so on, right? This is where narrative comes in. Now, for example, you might say that over the past quarter, we've noticed a high drop-off rate on the sign-up page. Now, this epic aims to simplify and build the authentication process to reduce friction and improve conversion. Now, that tells people exactly what this epic is targeting, right? That gives them the why. Now, next, you need to define the scope. Now, this is where we get clear about some boundaries, right? You need to give your epic some boundaries. Now, what's included and what's not included. This is where you say the epic includes sign up, login, forgot password, email verification, and so on. It does not include social login, Google login, and MFA. That is going to be handled in a letter epic, something like that, right? So your job here as a PM is to be very clear on what this epic covers. If there's something that's related or not part of this scope, please, at the very beginning, mention it, right? Let your team know where this epic stops so they can focus and they do not cross. Now, this is important because this is where what we call the scope creep happens. Scope creep, right? If you don't define it, people will start throwing things into the mix. Includes Google login. The other person will assume, right, that we have to use another UI, or a lot of confusion. And before you know it, your sprint is a mess and no one knows what has been done or what done looks like anymore, because there's a lot of confusion flying around, right? Also, in the scope section, talk about dependencies, right? This is one of those things people skip until it's somewhat a little too late. But dependencies can delay you, right? They can break your timelines, they can block your progress without any warnings, right? So if your epic relies on another team finishing something first, please say it at the very beginning. If it depends on let's say, on an API that is not yet stable from the development, please say it. If you need a new UI design from the designer who is working maybe on another project, please write that down as well and communicate this to your team. You're preparing them not to just throw them in. You have to show them the road ahead, including the potholes too. So all these things I just listed potholes, right? But if you tell them beforehand, so they work with an understanding that, oh, this particular UI is not ready first. Okay, this is how I can do this so that this UI that is not ready does not become a blocker to me, right? You know, they are already pre-informed and they know how to move ahead, right? Doing so will also help you plan better. Right? You can maybe stagger your work, rearrange your task, or unblock dependencies early because you are aware of them. Because if you are aware of them, you can unblock them pretty early, right? Then we move to the one that says completion criteria. Now, this is what you call your success checklist, right? This is how you and your team will know that this epic is done, right? This epic is done. I always say this part is not about aspiration, especially vague ones. You have to be very specific. Now, on your checklist, you want to write something like users can sign up with their email and receive a verification mail, right? Login and password reset flow are functional and pass. Q&A is done. You know, all success and error messages are handled. And end-to-end testing has been completed, right? These are the things that will be on your checklist and you'll be able to check them off at the end. Now, that way, when your team looks at the epic, they're not guessing, right? They're not doing guesswork. They know exactly what needs to happen for this to be considered complete. You go to your CTO or your client, right? And they ask questions like, is the authentication system ready? Because, well, clients and some CTOs and CEOs, they know how to ask those questions, even if they gave you the task 2 days ago. And once they use their eyes to see you, they'll ask, is it ready? Are you done? Are you guys not done? You know, all of those questions. So once you meet them and they ask you this question, you can boldly, you know, take out your checklist and say, yes, all these criteria have been met. Now, after you've titled your epic, written the narrative, clarified the scope, and laid down your completion criteria, right? You can now break them down into fast starts to turn into action. You've been talking about the what and the why. Now it's time for you to figure out the how. How are you going to build this thing? What are the actual steps? What does the team need to pick up and where do they need to start from? Right? So are we still together? Please drop your favorite. You see that we are still together. In a bit, we're going to get through. So anything we are still together. All right, thank you, Rose. Thank you, thank you. Okay, I'd like to see more active people in the class. So why do we use epics in Agile? So when people ask, why bother with epics? Well, the answer is actually very simple because things can get really messy very fast. And epics are how we bring structure to that mess without losing sight of the big picture that we have. Everything can fit into a sprint, a particular sprint, right? You're going to work on some features that are very huge. And I'm not talking about just changing maybe a color of some typo. I'm talking about, full-blown features. It could be maybe redesigning the dashboard, integrating a payment gateway, or building an onboarding flow from scratch and so on. Now, these are big and they are not going to get done in one sprint, right? These, you might have to break them down into 2 to 3 sprints, right? Right, and you have to fill your sprint backlog with them. Now, if you want to do them in one sprint, this is going to be like you trying to force an elephant into a very small suitcase rather, and that is not going to work. So what do? You create an epic. You give that big piece of work a home. You give it a space. Then within that team can take it on in chunks, that actually fit into a sprint. In chunks that actually fit into a sprint. Now, because I said that, so all right, so yeah, I'm going to take the second one again because we need to keep the big picture in view. That is why we use Epic in Agile. Now, Agile, like we all know, is great for small focused work, but sometimes you can still see my screen, right?
Yes, we can see.
All right, thank you. Agile is great for small focused work, right? But sometimes, right, when you're stuck looking at you know, the sprint or the next sprint, you might actually lose focus of the bigger goal, right? So let's say you're working on building a search feature. That's the example I was using, right? And then you have a story about the input field, the filter tags, the pagination, and search suggestions. Yes, I was saying that if we have designers on the call, they will actually understand what I am talking about. Now, you can easily get caught up working on those tasks that you lose sight of the bigger picture. But when you organize those stories under a bigger epic, right? It reminds everyone that, hey, we're building a search experience here, right? Not just a bunch of random UI blocks, right? The epics gives you context, right? It makes sure that the team understands what they are contributing to, right? It connects, some of the dots, right, that might be flying around, right? With the little tags, it just connects them together and help everybody deliver value. Now, the third one is why do we use Epic in Agile? We use Epic in Agile because product work spanned multiple teams. Now, you might have front-end developers, back-end designers, DevOps, Q&A, even marketing, or sometimes legal team involved in a single feature, trying to manage all of that through individual user stories, scattered around sprints. You could lose your mind, right? And Epic gives you a container. It holds all of those related work together, a container that you can just put them and it holds them together. So even if one part of the work, two, another part is in sprint 3, and another hasn't even been scoped out yet. But they all live under the same umbrella, under the same epic, right? You have broken them down. They might not have started. They might be in different sprint times. So this particular umbrella epic that you have created helps you house all of them without being confused or thrown off, right? That's the benefit of using epics in Agile. Now that's how you stay organized across all teams. Now that's how you make sure everyone's effort rolls up into one clear deliverables, right? Because stakeholders don't care about stories, like I said, they care about outcomes. So if you go to your CEO or client and start explaining what stories were completed in sprint 1 or sprint 6, they are going to zone off and leave you. They'll say this person doesn't even know what she's talking about, right? They don't care if the login form UI that you designed is done. They don't want to know, right? All they want to know is that is the user authentication feature ready? And now this user authentication feature is an umbrella that houses every other thing that you have in sprint 1, that you have in sprint 6, and so on, right? And that's where Epic comes in, right? The Epic is that umbrella. When you report progress, you report it at the Epic level, right? So when you're trying to report your progress so far to your boss, to your CEO, right? You report it at the Epic level. Now we are 80% through the authentication Epic. That's an example of a report. The search Epic is complete, right? That's the language the business side understands. They don't understand, and we are finished login screen, or we are finished user can, do forget password. No, they don't understand that language. They understand the language that says, oh, the filter functionality is complete, right? That's the language they understand. It gives them the outcome view, not the activity view. Please take note of that. It gives them the outcome view and not the activity view. And this is important because it builds trust, right? It builds trust between you as a product manager, between your stakeholders, right? It shows that you're not just, trying to tick some little boxes, right? That you're moving the product forward in a big, clear, and measurable way. And then we have, because it helps you prioritize long-term work without losing momentum, right? Not every epic is urgent. I said this earlier, but that doesn't mean it's not important. The fact that it's not a priority right now doesn't mean it's not important. Some features take time. Some work is also foundational. And if you don't keep those big items visible in your backlog, they'll get buried under, some other short-term noises, right? Now, Epic helps you keep strategic initiatives alive. You can chip away at them over time, right, across multiple sprints without losing the thread. You can mark incremental progress. You can say things like, hey, we've tackled the first half of the, let's say, admin tool, Epic. Let's finish the rest next month. So Epic just helps you section things. You can span out tasks to a year by using Epic, right? It could just be 6 epics, but inside that 6 epics, you can distribute tasks inside there that can last your team for an entire year. Now, that is the beautiful thing that Epic does for us, right? That's how you balance, short-term delivery with long-term product growth. And then we have, because it gives product managers room to think ahead, right? When you use epics in Agile, you as a product manager, you have the ability to think ahead. Now, let me be real here with you. If you don't think ahead as a product manager, you're just a reactive person, because you keep reacting to everything that is thrown at you, right? Somebody might come at you and say, oh, let's do this one. You're like, oh, okay, let's do this. They bring this one, let's do this. Like, oh, let's do this. You're just reacting to everything and to everyone, right? But those are not the criteria of a good product manager. You have to be responsive, right? But at the same time, you have to plan ahead and think ahead. Now, with epics, you can plant, some seeds for the future. Even if you're not ready to build something yet, you can capture the idea. You can outline the narratives, maybe draft a few early stories, and let it live in your backlog as epics, right? That way, when priorities changes, or the CEO suddenly says, we need that feature right now, you're not going back to start from scratch. You already have it stored somewhere in your backlog, right? You've already framed it, you've already thought it through, right? Epic helps you prepare. They give your backlog some depth, right? It helps you stay ahead of everybody, and that is how it should be if you are a PM. Now, because progress needs to be visible and trackable, Agile is about iteration, like we've always said. But iteration doesn't mean random motion. You still need to be able to track meaningful progress. When you're working on a big feature over 3 or 4 sprints, the only way to track that is through the epic. Your user stories get marked as done, and that epic moves closer to completion. You can see it happening, right? You can see it happening. You can see the progress moving. The progress becomes tangible, right? You can report it, you can celebrate it, and you can plan the next step around it. So that is the beautiful thing about epics. So now this is the fun part of today's class, how to break epics into user stories. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now because I want to reshare another screen. Meanwhile, do we have any questions so far? Do we have any questions so far? If you don't ask me a question, I'll ask you. Cool. Tell me when you can see the screen. You see my screen?
Yes, you can see your screen, ma.
So you can still see it, right? So, okay. All right, so what we have on the screen is a sample I want to put together for us, right? It's just a blank sheet, and I'm going to show us how to break down epics into user stories with this, right? So let's the sample I want to use today is a money transfer feature, right? Let's say we want to build a money transfer feature, right? First of all, I'm going to start by putting in my header. Please confirm you can still hear me and you can see my screen.
Yes, I can hear you. I can also see your screen.
What screen are you seeing, please?
Excel sheets, like a spreadsheet.
All right. Okay, so yeah, let's start to fill that in. This is going to be please let's take note of this because your next task is going to be based on this. So this is our epic title. The next one, we are going to have epic narrative. Remember what we talked about? Epic narrative, or you could call it epic description. And the next one is the user story ID. Or let's start with user story first. User story, and the next one is going to be the user story ID. And then we'll have priority, right? And in priority, you also have things like can have high priority, medium priority, or low priority, right? These are very important for you to note. And then the next one will be dependency. That if you have any dependency, if any, let me just indicate it there, if any. Right, and then you have the acceptance criteria. Your acceptance criteria. Doing the money transfer feature. Let's just right. Let me just reshare again. You can see my screen, right? Just give me a thumbs up. Yes, okay, thank you. All right, so I said, remember we are going to be working with a money transfer feature. So I'm just going to write that out, money transfer feature. Please take note of this. Now, the narrative here should be for those of us you've transferred money before with your bank app. Now, the narrative here should be something like we want users to be able to send money from their bank accounts to other accounts safely. Safely needed, well, yeah, safely, quickly, and with confirmation, right? Confirmation. Now, this is your epic description, right? This right here, the money transfer feature is your epic. Now, this one right here is your epic description. I still think that we should add some more thing now. This feature, let me just add this. This feature should support transfers to other banks, scheduled transfers, and saving of beneficiaries. So this makes it more lengthy and it sounds a bit more like an epic, like we discussed. Right, I'm just going to wrap this. All right, and now the user story for this. Who can tell me what the user story description here would be? Yeah. Oh, this is time for us to actually interact. I want to hear people talk, right? This is user story description. All right. you can use the charts. So the user story description here would be born from this epic, right? You've seen that the goal here is that we want to be able to send money from bank users to be able to send money from their bank accounts to other accounts, and they want to be able to do that safely, quickly, and they need a confirmation as well when they have sent that money. Now, the second part says that this feature should support transfers to other bank, and you should be able to schedule transfers, and also you should be able to save beneficiaries. Now, the first user story here should be, as a user, I want to select, sorry, it's not that. As a user, I want to enter, let's use this one first, enter account details and amount so I can send money to a new recipient, right? To a new recipient. So that is going to be your first user story. Now, can you see the difference between this one and this one? This one here is what we call the epic, which is fit for your CEOs, your stakeholders, and people who are not really a part of your team, right? Well, this one right here is a more broken down user story, like we talked about. Your designer can pick this up and put together a screen that allows user to input the account details and the amount, and a screen that has an action button that says send money, right? So this is a more broken down user story. Now, the user story ID here, that is if you are actually using this particular one, is this particular one is just peculiar, right? So where you are working. So it can be trans 001, just using a random distance. So now, the reason why I'm using trans 001 is because it has to do with, sending of money, transferring of money. That's why I'm using trans 001. And your priority here is going to be high, because this is a user need. Remember, we are user-centered. So the priority here is high. And then dependencies, there are actually no dependencies here because this looks like a fresh screen, right? The designer has to start this from scratch. He or she is not iterating, and there is no body developing this screen already. So there are no dependencies here. There is none. So you just turn that down. So there is none. And now the acceptance criteria for this one would be that user can enter. Now, if you look at the user story again, as a user, I want to enter account details and amount so I can send money to a new recipient. Now, the acceptance criteria here should be that user can enter account number and amount, right? An amount, and can click continue or submit, depending on what the next screen is, continue or submit. Now, this is the acceptance criteria. So whatever it is that you're doing, or at the end of the day, you have to make sure that this particular action, the user can, complete this particular action successfully without any hindrance, right? Because this is the acceptance criteria, and this is what your stakeholder is going to ask. The money transfer, have we been able to sort out the, transfer issues? This is what you present to your stakeholders at that point. And now you can put this under sprint 1, right? You can put this under sprint 1. As we progress, I am going to tell us how to create sprint and so on. That is going to be when we delve into tools. Now, the second one, it is still money transfer, right? This epic is very huge, and we have just broken down the first part of it, right? So we are still under money transfer. Now let us break down this epic again. Now bring this down here because we are still using the same epic. We just want to break down the user stories. So now this user story is going to be down as a user, I want to confirm the recipient name before completing the transfer. So I feel secure, right? That's the second user story you have broken down from this epic that we have here. So I'm going to call this trans 002. Right? And the priority of this is also high. Now, dependencies, there are none as well here because it's not dependent on anybody, right? Now, the acceptance criteria for this as well is that user can enter account number and the acceptance criteria here should be that
Recipient.
system. Can you hear me? Hello? I'm saying something. Okay. So the acceptance criteria here I was saying was that system shows account name based on the entered details or based on entered details before proceeding. You know, when you're doing a transfer with your bank app, when you input the person's account details, right? And the name does not pop up, you're going to be very skeptical about going forward. You have to go back and recheck the account number, right? So this should be the acceptance criteria. So when in the process of trying to send this money, right, I have, imputed the account details. The system should show me the account name based on the entered detail, right, before you get to proceed, so that you are certain that that name is the person you want to, send the money to. I hope we are following. Kindly give me a reaction on that so that I know we are together. And you can still put this under sprint 1, right? Put this under sprint 1. Are we together?
Yes, ma, we can hear you, ma.
All right, thank you. All right, I hope this is making sense to us now. So now let's break it down again. Remember, we are still on one epic. This particular epic has so far given us 2 user stories underneath it, right? Now we are still going to use this particular epic and we are going to break it down into another user story. Now, after you have seen the name, right, what should be the next thing? Now, the next user story there should be, as a user, I want to receive a successful receipt rather. Yeah. A receipt after a successful transfer. So I can have proof of the transaction. Right? I hope this makes sense to us. And then you can give this trans 003. Right? You can give this trans 003 and you can put this in the, this is also, no, we can narrow this down to medium. This is no longer a high priority, right? We can narrow this down to medium, right? In this case. And there are no dependencies still. There are no dependencies. And now the success or acceptance criteria for this would be that system should show the system, right, should be able to show you the receipt, right? Let's word that in an acceptable way. Or we should say a receipt is displayed and sent to either your email after transfer, after transfer is completed, something like that. But you get the point. So this is still under this point. I think you can put this under sprint too, right? Let's say we are using every user story that is not a high priority, every user story that is minimum is under sprint too, right? I hope this makes sense to us. So I'm going to give a few more and then we'll wrap this up. Now, using the same epic title and using the same epic narration, right? We are going to break down another user story. Now, let's say that for this one, we want to be able to view recent transfers so that you can, keep track of your spending. Now, how do you word out in product management? You say that as a user, I want to view my recent transfers so I can keep track of my spending. I think that makes sense. Right? Keep track of my spending. Now, this is the user story. How many user stories do we have from the same epic, right? As you can see, we've gotten 4 different user stories from the same epic. That is so amazing, right? Somebody's saying, why is trans 003 in priority? Well, for this particular feature implementation, it is minimum priority, right? But it varies. In most cases, you can put it as a high priority, right? It varies based on the user needs. It varies based on, the reviews and ratings that you've been getting and the complaints as well. So if this 003 is part of the first 10, let's say you're using a count of 1 to 10. If it's part of the first 10 of the complaint you're getting from user, then you can put it as a high priority. But if it is not, you can always push it down. So it varies. I hope that answers you, prepare my cap.
Thank you.
All right. So trans 004, we can put this under trans 004. Okay, James is asking, what does Spring mean epic, please? All right, so you're clearly asking this question because you're not a part of the last class or you're not paying attention. So sprint is like breaking things down, right? I'll send you back to the previous class video, right, for you to go and check that. For the purpose of this class, we are just going to continue. Right, so this is under transfer 04, and then what we have there is as a user wants to view my recent transfer so I can keep track of my spending. Now you can put this under medium as well. And remember our medium is in sprint 2, right? So there are also no dependencies here. And now the acceptance criteria for this one could be something like user can see a list of past transfers, right? Transfers with date and amounts. Please, I hope we are taking note of this. Your next task is going to help you. So user can see list of past transfers with dates and amount. This is the acceptance criteria for this. So do we understand? I'm going to, let me add one more and then I'll stop there. So still under the same epic title and under the same epic narrative, we are going to bring out another user story. Now we have brought out, with this particular epic narrative, we can provide close to 10 user stories. Now, do you see the beautiful part of epics? Now, this particular sentence has boxed all of this user story description into itself, right? So you can present this to your stakeholder and they understand what you're talking about, but they don't just see these other chunk of work that we are putting out right here. And that's the beautiful thing when it comes to epic, right? When using epic in user stories, this is the beautiful part of it. So now let's give one more, and that one more could be let's do the beneficiary part, right? It says as a user, I want to from my saved contact to retype details all the time, right? You get the point. No, the user story here would be that user can view and select from saved beneficiaries, right? Beneficiaries, depending on the priority of it. I'm going to take question now. Do you have questions? No questions. I'm going to ask my question. I do not have questions. So are we trying to say that we are all good? Ijoma, Chioma, Chukwemeka asked. Uchechukwu, Rose. Where is Favor? She dropped out. Okay, Favor is here. Favor, you don't have a question. Kelechi. That's very beautiful. So I expect everybody to ace the next task. Let me stop recording now.